I was born in the Bronx and of a Jewish family. And I think the thing that I loved most of that experience was I learned what a role the women in my family played. My grandmother brought up all of her 5 children alone. The old man had gone back to the old country in Romania. And my grandmother and my mother, who had been, when my father died when I was 4 years old, a guy named Louis Cohen, so I never knew him. All I knew was the women who brought my brother and I up and saw us through college and took care of us, and I think gave me the kind of background that have now helped. We were all poor. It was the heart of the Depression. And so if you want to ask me about where I come from, my background was a Jewish, Romanian, Russian family. My father, Louis Cohen, was second generation Russian, but my stepfather was first generation from Poland and France and all that kind of background. So I have a European background, living with a bunch of people who came from the pogroms and in that particular segment. So my background was a typical middle class Jewish kid whose stepfather was a furrier and hated him. I hated him. He hated the unions, and I was beginning to be radical. I was beginning to have a feeling about the times I lived in. And I tell you something, now that you talk, we lived we moved to a place next to the L, the Woodlawn Avenue, Jerome Avenue L, and I have never heard a single record, Beethoven, Brahms, whatever you ask, the da-da-da, the uptown train, da-da-da-da, the downtown train. But I could see the trains as they passed my window. I was studying. But we studied in spite of it. And so I never, ever heard music, and I loved classical music. We did our homework, my brother and I, right on the dining room table. And then we pulled out the cot with the bed bugs and slept in that one, the two of us. And that was a life I accepted. I always was concerned about the Depression, because for me, high school was all right, but when you start to go to college and you have to think of where you're going, and then realize that so many millions are unemployed, 17 million unemployed, and my best friend committed suicide, who graduated summa cum laude because he couldn't get the kind of job that he wanted. Nobody in our family was inclined to the arts. Nobody was an actor. Nobody was a musician. I mean, I feel like I'm a freak in a way. Only my brother was the one who had faith in me, thought I should be an actor. And when my brother heard of WMCA in New York, were looking for talent from the streets of the city of New York, he made an appointment for me. And I would not have cut class if I really weren't interested. And he said, kid, I think you should go down there. And he's my younger brother, and he's calling me kid, see? And I went down for an audition. I had no idea what I was doing. But whatever made me go down, it was the right thing for me, because it kicked off my life. I went down there, I wasn't nervous. Everybody around me was nervous. Women crying with their mothers and everything. I walk in, and there's a guy named Sam Levine. At that time was a star of a movie a stage called The Milky Way. And he and a guy named Charles Martin, who was the head of the station, who was young, and wrote a thing called 5-Star Final for Adler's shoe, Adam Hatch, I think it was. And it was like the March of Time. And I walked in, and they said, won't you sit down? I said, oh, they're using a heavy voice. I said, I certainly will. I didn't know what I said. Read this. Now, I tell you, if they did that to me today, I would say, let me look it over. I picked it up. It was a gangster. I'd just seen Paul Muni in Scarface. Gangster's calling his mother. No, I read this speech. Hey, Ma, really, whatever I did, I noticed that they were very interested. And they said, have you ever been interested in the theater? I said, all my life. I went through this whole spiel that was probably my beginning as an actor. I lied completely. I loved it. Deep movement to a poor, go to college. And By the time I finished, I got into this class. Up until the time of the Federal Theater, I mean, I didn't know how one makes a living. I just knew that I should hang around actors. And I'd done one radio show under this guy, Charlie Martin, which I enjoyed, and got first time I've ever seen a review of something that I did. And then when you got on the Federal Theater, it was only because you had proved that there was a program with your history and whatever made up lies that I put in it, and also that admission was charged. You didn't have to be an equity member. There was a big fight in Actors Equity at that time, and I suppose if I were on the board of directors of Actors Equity at that time, I said, no, this should be for the professional actors who've been thrown out of work. But we didn't do it that way. It just wasn't done. I bless whoever stood up the other way around. That's why I'm very lenient about people coming into our union. I feel we shouldn't be too harsh about things like that. But once I got into the Federal Theater, remember, we got $23.86 a week. The only condition was you were put with a group of other actors, some writers, directors, and producers, and told all you have to do is show up for 4 hours a day. The thing was to put money in the circulation. On $23.86 a week at that time would be equivalent to maybe $600-700 in purchasing power today. And I was able to support my family and eat and travel and do everything on that $23.86 a week. But what happened is that I then met people like Julie Dassin, who was also a starving actor. If anybody told you that that they were there by accident or they just by choice, it didn't happen that way. They all had to be on home relief. It was the first time I saw the shame in America of people who had worked and made believe, well, I'm only here temporarily. I mean, I have an engagement in Newark, New Jersey, and I want to go to Chicago. But I could see it as a young person who has always been interested socially in what was going on, who got educated in City College with these brilliant guys arguing back and forth until I learned every point of view. I learned the point of view of the Marxists, of the Trotskyites, of all of the different points of view, just opposite of my own background. But I was, that gave me the premise of seeing what I was in and seeing it objectively to some extent, yet I was in it. And for the first time in my life, I earned some money. And then I became the editor of the Wall newspaper, that kind of thing. Got in the union that was formed, the City Project Council, unheard of, a union, the government giving you money and you formed a union. And then I met all these wonderful people. They were not anybody I'd ever meet anywhere else. Vaudevillians, circus performers, wonderful actors, and bad directors, didn't make any good directors. All it was, I was in the Children's Theater of the WPA, and we did original works, and one of them was called The Revolt of the Beavers, and that got us in publicity, hounded by Boy Scout Troop 237 in the Bronx. It said that we were doing a communist play, that the Revolt of the Beavers was that there was the beavers who were stripping the bark, and they were the ones that never got any food. They were always hungry. Then there was a chief of the beavers, and I was, of course, on the other side. My usual role, I played a reactionary beaver. Rough, tough, I was tough. Rough, tough, and gruff, I was tough. But I learned my art of makeup. In other words, I learned a lot. And I had a background. Slowly, I had begun to get into the group theater apprentice, the theater collective, the theater of action. All of those things were later added to my life. But they were extensions of working. And so when I wasn't working, it didn't make any difference. I still followed my practice. I still followed the practice of the business. I went into these groups. I was not that radical, but I went into those radical groups, and they were the new wave. That was a new thing. That was Stanislavski, and that was all feeling and emotion. The only thing is I was too cheerful. I mean, my nature, you look at me, you listen to me talk, and I have a half smile on my face most of the time, I realize. I don't mean to do it. You criticize me about something I don't know, listen, they say, what's so funny? So I was against the Stanislavski system to some extent because everybody was so grim. And I didn't know how to be that grim. I could act it, but it was something against my nature at the same time, intrigued by the knowledge that I was picking up. And I learned a lot because I worked with really great actors from the group theater, and good people, Earl Robinson, who would use you in a musical thing, whether you sang or not. That was the new style, like Bertolt Brecht. You could sell a song, feel it, sing a couple of notes. So all fit in my background, no musical training, nothing. So that was the basis of my working, was to get know more about acting. See, I felt I was terrible. I didn't know how to walk across the room. I see young actors, 19 years old, really know what to do. I mean, I had no idea, except that I worked harder, maybe, based on the one principle that if there's a little flame inside of you, it has to be nourished. I know people now who had a lot of talent and who disappeared. They didn't nourish that flame. And I think that I learned that that was the answer, was the hard work and the excitement about the craft and working at it and not giving up. Stella Adler taught me everything I needed to know from the viewpoint of getting rid of this crap about you have to suffer, putting it on a practical basis, but an honest basis, an exciting basis, a theatrical basis. I loved her on the stage. I loved Sandy Meisner on the stage. I loved Bobby Lewis on the stage. I loved a lot of the group. But these guys and this woman were the ones who were the most theatrical. And that was what she taught me. And how to break down a script, how to read it and create a character. And I pay her to this day. I am grateful to her. I know she loves me. She brought my wife, and Sarah Cunningham was a young student there. We fell in love in 3 months we got married, between a matinee and evening show in Chicago. I was doing Native Son. I mean, it was not money, it was she put together all of the elements that I talked to you about that go into the background of an actor and find that you are not a complete person and you can't know it all in one time. But when somebody comes along and makes a fist, puts all the pieces of knowledge together, then even though you unclench the fist at times to get new areas, maybe two hands. See, when the parts are really great, you don't even need the two hands. You're starting, and it all begins to come together without saying, what is my action here? What is that? You don't have to do all of that all the time. So in a way, I'm now coalescing for myself a background that begins to come together with a logic that doesn't seem to have a logic and pays off as a human being. And I feel that's the most important part of me, not just an actor. I love being an actor. I love being recognized in the street. It makes me feel like I'm communicating to people because I feel comfortable. Now I can do it all over the world. Wherever I travel, people have seen television and film. And when somebody recognizes you from another language and another, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're part of the world. I believe in it. See, I don't have to make it up. My enthusiasm that is showing right now is because I really believe in that one world. And I've done everything in my life to bring people together, and yet I could never leave this country till I was 60 years old. That's the interesting thing to me. So it's all, in the latter part of my life, new facets opening up within inside of me. So it's funny you asked one question, and then that leads to all these other things, but basically once I got started in the theater, up until the time that I was called before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and that's another story. I was doing a show called Wooden Dish with Louis Calhern, and that changed. That was a time when I was afraid I will never work again. I wanted to be in this war against Hitler. So I got in the Air Force as a radio operator. I made a mistake when they said, "What's your background?" I said, "Radio." I mean, radio announcer. Been in shows like Young Dr. Malone, that kind of thing, Merton Marge. And so I ended up in the Air Force as a radio to fix radios. And I told you that I have no talent, mechanical talent. I kick the radio, but I knew intellectually how to pass all the exams. Once I got in the Air Force, I finally convinced them that I really meant radio. So then I studied for a control tower operator. Studied that, and I became a tower operator in Scottsdale, Illinois, and the head of the Army Aircraft Communications System Bulletin for the world. And then I think that they found out that I had a radical background because I applied for offices, OCS, And I was rejected because I had been with Native Son and involved with a communist organization called the NAACP. And I found that out from an officer who said, "Johnny, you make a good officer. You got a good record, but you fit with all those communist organizations." I said, "What?" And he told me. And once I got that, then they let me stay in the tower for a while. Finally they shifted me to Chanute Field as a tower operator. And I thought that everything was over. And then the records kept following my being with the left-wing theater groups and all the rest of it, which were considered pretty bad in those days. I mean, you were dangerous, I suppose. But what happened was that from that point on, I began to move all around. My career in the Air Force was very disturbing because they would move me every 3 weeks. My wife hardly knew where I was because I was ending up in B-29 bases. If I was a menace in a control tower where I won a medal for saving the lives of 2 P-51 pilots and editing a newspaper, that was considered, what do they think I was going to do? I hated Hitler. I was in the war that I wanted to be in, the only war that I would have loved to be in, and taken out of the control tower eventually, and just becoming a firefighter. In Wendover, Utah, was a secret Army air base. I went from one that there was not a secret base, and by the brilliance of the Army and the Air Force, was put into a secret base. And that burned to the ground, and thank God I was in a 3-day pass. Otherwise, I would have been maybe killed or put in jail or whatever it was. I got out of the Air Force at the end of 4 years of service, and I must say I'm probably the only one that I know of that would promise that I would never volunteer to be in the National Guard, and that I don't mind. I would not want to be in the Air Force anymore. I think that automatically, as an actor who had a lot of stage background, I was able to qualify for live television. I mean, live television was unique. It was a combination of acting on stage and doing television. And we had these great writers that nobody knew about, whether Rod Serling, whoever it was. These are all people, Norman Corwin, writing in a field that was revolutionary in a sense, and nobody had any restrictions on you. You could do a soap. You could do, like, as I told you, occasionally Captain Video. But I became kind of semi-regular in those things. What we were seeing from soap opera, radio, which I did several of before the war, now it was soap opera on live television. And because you had a theater background, that was important. In other words, it was natural. There was no there was no television union. Later on, it became what we call Television Authority. That was a combination of Actors Equity, Screen Actors Guild, and Radio, AFTRA, all in TVA. So that was an ad hoc to cover the different demands of television. We have a contract in Screen Actors Guild. We have a contract with Actors Equity. We had a contract with radio through AFTRA, but we had no television contract. So the 3 unions got together. As a matter of fact, the way I would love to see it again, got together and formed the Television Authority. And that authority became the combined jurisdiction over television. For example, at that time we had residuals. They decided that if you did a show and you got $500 over national television, then if they did the show again, showed the show again, and they had tape, what we call kinescope, then you would get $500. We lost all that when Screen Actors Guild originally took over that authority to some extent. We lost that. We didn't get pensions and welfare. We didn't get anything. We lost all of that business of residuals until 1962, I think it was. But this is 1947, 48. I'm talking New York. I'm talking theater. I'm talking wonderful plays that were on. That was exciting. And then it was at that time that I found out about the fact when I was got on the blacklist. But most of it came from loyalty oaths, investigation here in California of the Actors Lab, the whole business into the business about the writers, the whole investigation by Ronnie Reagan supporting the the fight against communists in the industry, the whole business of the Cold War beginning to take place in California. And those of us in New York were aware that once that happened, it's going to hit us in New York. And we tried to fight against it, supported them. I would say that Marlon Brando and Jimmy and I and other actors who were working on Broadway theater went down to the hearings in Washington of Ring Lardner and Bertolt Brecht. This is all our background, training-wise, to give support. But eventually what happened is that the support that we gave the people in California in the Actors Lab against the California Un-American Committee began to hit back into New York. We knew it was going to hit. And once it did, it began to spread. It was a wonderful, wonderful weapon. And that was when the blacklisting came out of a period of 1947 to 1951, hitting New York around 51, and then leading into the hearings of the Committee on 55. Now, that's pretty accurate. And that was a period when we had no way of finding out what was going on, but we met against it, and eventually those of us who fought against blacklisting, that other people on the fringe, all were put in the same list. So I would say at one time we had almost 400 actors who couldn't work based on being a gray list and a black list and so forth and so on. And it was that period of time when I got very, very active in fighting it. And I must tell you, I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of my wife. I'm proud of Jack Gilford. I'm proud of Zero Mostel. All these wonderful actors and people who were named by somebody who gave a few names, like one of our great Jerome Robbins who mentioned a few names of people he didn't like, you know, that kind of thing. I didn't know these guys. See, I didn't know Kazan that way. I mean, I was not in the Communist Party cell with Kazan, that kind of stuff. I knew enough to know what was going on. Once I got involved in that fight, then I knew I was going to be in the same boat. And I was eventually. And the last show I did was for Sidney Lumet. Are you interested in this? I did a movie with Anthony Quinn, an hour-long show called Danger. And I played his brother, a big part. And just a day before we were to do it live, I mean, we were doing live. It's all booked in live. And we rehearsed for a week and a half. Sidney was called up by CBS, the vice president of CBS, and the producer. I didn't know what happened. They came back down in about an hour, and we finished, and I did the show. Found out the producer, Charlie Martin, said to me, "John, we were just called up, the office of the vice president, and he said they got a call from Young and Rubicam, who was the advertiser, who advertised the product, and they had gotten a call from a guy named Johnson in Syracuse, who owned a supermarket, 3 supermarkets. He was the head of the American Legion groups, and he said, Amador toothpaste, which is sponsored by Young and Rubicam, is using a communist, and we will remove Amador toothpaste from our shelves, or we will put a sign underneath, Amador toothpaste sponsors communists. John Randolph's a communist. Young and Rubicam didn't know who the hell I was. I mean, I was an actor. I was a good actor, and I worked for Young and Rubicam many times. But when a sponsor says, we won't, we get them off, we don't care, do what you can, and said to Sidney Lumet, and all of this is true. I don't know if Sidney doesn't remember it. I know I remember it. And he said, Sidney, they said, you will not direct another television show if you hire John Randolph. Get him off. He said, I can't get him off. This is what the producer. Sidney stood up for me. He said, I can't do it. John is playing a leading part. We're paying him a lot of money, $500, a big deal. And he, we can't replace him. We have to go on the air. He said, well then, but don't ever hire him again, otherwise you're finished. I never worked for Sidney Lumet again until I did Serpico, years after the blacklist ended. It's very interesting to look at that time period. We're now getting to a point where the lowest point in my life financially. By this, I haven't talked about the fact that I had a little girl, a child, and it was about 3 years old. And what happened was that I was fighting the blacklist. I was able to get through on some shows without knowing quite what was happening. I told you about organizing a protest, a resolution against blacklisting with Eli Wallach and Lee Grant, Ossie Davis, Ruby Dee, myself, Sarah. And but that time I already had a job in Paint Your Wagon, which is a musical by Leonard Lowe. And so I pretty much had a job for 9 months or a year, kind of guaranteed, and wrote a long letter about my experience and having seen how the blacklisting works, bringing it up to the surface. And a resolution was passed in Actors' Equity, the only place against blacklisting. So that was a wonderful thing. I loved the theater because of that alone. Their censorship was abhorrent. The poorest area was abhorrent. And there was small business people, show business was, producer was small. He didn't have to please the entire United States. So anyway, the point is that the League of New York Theaters was wonderful about all of that. And probably the only time I ever said anything nice about the League of New York Theaters, but now the more I look back, I realize that they were much more liberal and open. But basically, at that time, when fighting the blacklist, I ended up, of course, being on the blacklist. Then what happened was we got rid of the people, I'm telescoping, who were doing the blacklisting in the union, Aware Incorporated. When you ran against those people as a slate in AFTRA, you were on the list. You were a commie. Anybody who spoke up against them were a commie. We found out how the list was. The union leadership was involved. Screen Actors Guild was involved, the leadership. We didn't know that was going on. But all of that time, we found out that there was a hate magazine called by Aware Incorporated, Hartnett, a guy named Hartnett, putting it out, a self-appointed censor, and everybody was paying him $7 a shot to clear people's names, and began to find out the whole bulletins and everything, began to find out what was going on. That when we started to fight concretely against these things, exposing it in the industry, the only strength was in the theater. Theater people would sign their names, and they were blacklisted. Kim Hunter, Patricia O'Neill. Patricia Neal, wonderful people, got blacklisted because they signed their names as something against the blacklisting, the distribution of the New York Post articles against blacklisting. So now as I talk about this period, you can see what's happening inside of me is all the things that were told to me when I was up for a job. They say, "Are you available?" became the word. And so I say, "Yes, I'm available for this particular show." And then the call saying, "Listen, we changed the part to a midget, or we changed the part to a woman," or, and slowly it became a hateful thing. It became something that you couldn't stand the words, "Are you available?" See? And then, of course, we defeated Aware Incorporated. John Henry Falk was made president of the union. Charles Collingwood was made vice president. We beat the people who were the right-wingers. The next week, subpoenas were out by the House Committee on Un-American Activities. That became the association between Broadway and radio and television and film. All of it came together, because once you beat them on one level, then that means they send out their warning signals. The Reds are taking over. The commies are taking over Broadway. Now the New York Theater was obviously read propaganda to help, tell the people that are coming here for entertainment, they're coming here for the revolution. The reason to come into Broadway, that the actors on Broadway who have no money are the ones who are supporting the Soviet revolution, is sheer nonsense. It's ridiculous. But that ridiculous was truth in those days, you say. So what happened to me is that I was one of those who was subpoenaed. Simultaneously with that, I got a job in a show called Wooden Dish. Louis Calhoun was the star and the director. His boss was a member of the Hollywood group that hated actors, the blacklisted actors. Producer was deadly. My name appeared in the paper. as being subpoenaed with several other people, Zero Mostel and Jack Gilford and others, and Madeline Lee, subpoenaed to appear before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Francis Walters from Pennsylvania was the guy. They're going to investigate Broadway for the first time. And at the same time, next to it, was a column that John Randolph had been hired as in a featured part opposite Louis Calhoun. At that time, I was in a theater called the Brattle Theater doing Shakespeare. Much Ado About Nothing. And I got the subpoena, and I knew I was going to get it. The moment I got it, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that I was going to have to take a stand against blacklisting. I came in from the Brattle Theater to speak to the head of Actors Equity, a guy named Angus Duncan, the executive secretary. I said I was going to fight this thing. I already planned in my mind I was going to issue a leaflet and send them out to 4,000 people who supported me and others in the fight against blacklisting. And then my right to work, and I knew as soon as I got off the train to go to the theater that night at the Brattle Theater, there was going to be a telegram from the producer, Louis Calhoun, saying, I'm sorry, we have to take advantage of the 5-day clause, which means that they could give you notice. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know Louis Calhoun very well, but I was the first actor to get an offer for a job. It was that way, see? So I was in a really rough position. I went into the theater, and there was the stage manager with a telegram. He said, Don, I have a telegram for you. And brave as I am, I tell you, emotionally, my heart started beating. It's terrible because it was real, you see? I mean, it was everything that you say, I'll fight, but underneath also, you don't want to have to do it. And it's like being hurt for the first time, really being hurt badly because it was real. I opened up the telegram and it said, just want you to know, love having you in the show. Know we'll have a splendid engagement together, signed Louis Calhoun. Instead of giving me a notice, it was a pat on the back from a guy I didn't know anything about. And then I went into the dressing room. I was doing Much Ado About Nothing, a Spanish version. Why I was stuck with all of these Shakespearean actors. I had just done Guys and Dolls in New York. That was my stuff, playing Nathan Detroit on the city hall, the city center. That was where I felt comfortable with actors that I understood who were New Yorkers, tough. Why did I end up? I took a job doing a Shakespearean play. I'm not a Shakespearean actor. And doing that, why was I stuck with all these people very fancy? I thought maybe they're various, a little gay, and I'm not my type. And whatever it was, they were all wonderful actors. But I didn't know anything about them. I took that job, and I was a guest, so I was getting $90 a week, more than they were getting. And they were from Harvard and all that stuff. I went into the dressing room, and I want you to know something. I love those actors. They started to sing, "Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?" I looked at these people in their Shakespearean wardrobe and everything, and then they sang "Solidarity Forever," and I broke up. It was too funny. It was funny in the middle of all of this. They were telling me they support me in their own way, and their way was that the head of their theater, the founder of the Brattle Theater, was a professor in Harvard, who they were all GIs in some form or another, and they ended up in Harvard. And they were looked upon as interlopers by the other students. But there was a Professor Matheson, I haven't thought of his name, for a long time. He took them in and formed a theater group with them because he loved them. And he was called up before the House Committee, the Massachusetts House Committee on Un-American Activity, and he committed suicide. And they formed the Brattle Theater and had a plaque in the theater to this man. So they understood, they were on my side. So all during the preparation of the House Committee, they raised money, $150, so I could pay the lawyer and that I could travel back and forth every day to be briefed and knowing how to fight against the House Committee. That was the low point in the sense that I saw the committee. I must tell you, I got the first laugh. My mother, It was wonderful. Jimmy Whitman told the story. He was so worried about me. He was ready in Hollywood, and I'm being in front of the House Committee on Un-American Activity. My pictures all over the paper. Sarah's pictures all over the paper. We defy the committee, but he was worried about me, and he spoke to my mother. He said, "Mr. Lippman, how's John doing?" He said, "It's all right." I said, "I know. I was worried. I saw that he appeared before the House Committee on Un-American Activities," and she said, "Yeah, you know, he got the first laugh." My mother, who had said to me when I was subpoenaed, came down from New Britain, Connecticut, to stay in my kitchen and say, "Listen, I'm your mother. You can tell me, you really believe in the violent overthrow of the government by force and violence?" I say, "Ma, I'm too busy rehearsing and fighting all this stuff. You know, they took a gun away from me in the army. You know me. You know your own son. I never hit anybody in my life." I said, I know, but, you know, I'm your mother. I worry sometimes." See? That same woman, Fred, got the first laugh. The first laugh was when the committee, Francis Waller, they go through this whole crap of how many weeks, what shows have you been in? What's your name? Mortimer Lippman, Emmanuel Cohen, I see. And now John Randolph, that's your professional. Yeah, go through a whole routine. It's all soft until they say, and then I got pissed off at all of this stuff. How many weeks? We who had no money. I mean, we were making nothing. Still, we're going to support the Red Movement. And all of a sudden, we got to the point I said, "Listen, Mr. Walters, right now I'm in a show, no reflection on this committee," I said, called Much Ado About Nothing, and got the first laugh. Sarah, who was in tears and was following me, saw me being called up before the committee. It was horror. It's like a terrible, terrible circus. All the right-wingers in the first rows and the left-wingers behind them, and jammed, and the cameras and the radio and everything. We were in a circus, and we couldn't speak with our lawyer. Not like Ollie North and speaking to Sullivan. Our lawyer, Leonard Boudin, a great constitutional lawyer, kick you under the table. He was not allowed to give you any advice. He was not allowed to defend you. It was a kangaroo court. So you imagine what we were under. We never had this experience. Anyway, the point was that with all of that, I must say, when Sarah said, when I heard John say, "Hiya, boys," she said, "Oh, John is going to charm them." And the point is, I mean, once the die was cast, I was myself. We weren't going to, I'd take the Fifth Amendment or the First Amendment, and I would do it to protect myself, because we didn't know who was giving names and what the hell it was all about. We knew that somebody was talking. But the point was that was the beginning of my experience against the House Committee. Now we get to the low point. I went to work right after defying the committee in the wooden dish. And then Roy Cohn and Brooklyn Against Communism, led by Roy Cohn and Gottfried Schmidt, picketed me. Opening night. The only actor ever in America picketed in the flesh. Charlie Chaplin was picketed as a movie, and then he ended up out of the theater. But I was picketed in the flesh. And Louis Calhern was wonderful. And the guy who told the picketers when I would be there, when the opening night was, at what time, lied to them. He had been a veteran of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, and he was a house manager for the Schuberts. He lied. He said, "It isn't until 8:30, but the audience came in at 7:30, see? So they never saw any picket line. The picket line came too late. But once they started, they kept every day. And though we didn't get rave notices and the show closed in about 3 weeks, I never forget Louis Calhern saying, before we were all sitting around the table, the curtain is about to go up, he said, "Are those fascists out there again?" I said, "Yes, Louis." He said, "Boy, in the old days, Jack Barrymore and I just take a bat and beat the shit out of them." I mean, it was wonderful to get that kind of support. I was 35 when I blacklisted. It wasn't until 50 that I began to work in Hollywood. So I went through all of those phases. And in the process, when I finally really broke for me, first with the Defenders, where I began to do 3 or 4 shows like that, one East Side, West Side, with George C. Scott. Slowly, it was beginning to break. And when it broke, it was John Frankenheimer who had once said to me, "John, we young people, we love you, and I know your work as an actor, and I want you to know one day you'll work for us. We hate the blacklist." And then I did a screen test for him, and he said, "You'll hear from me one way or the other." And I never did. He was cocky. He was the top director, young, 26 years old, write his own ticket. And I know that it was upsetting, but I took it as another one of the old crap. Just part of, "Are you available?" "Yes, I am." But my wife said to me, "John, you go up to all of those things. They call you for a screen test and you know they're going to blacklist. You go up there, show them your face, see?" I said, "Sarah, you're right." And anyway, the point is that Frankenheimer was casting a movie called Seconds, and he had just done Manchurian Candidate and 7 Days of May, and he was hot in Hollywood. When you're hot in Hollywood and you can make money from them, man, they don't care anything about you, whoever you are. You're part of that formula. He was looking for a man who was unknown, who was a star or a top featured player, but whose face was not familiar to an audience. Well, I got the right guy, because for 15 years I couldn't be anywhere. Nobody knew what my face was. And what happened was that he was the one who wanted me. And my agent did not recommend me. They said, "I thought, looking for a star, John, you're not that what." I went up to see Frankenheimer with a bunch of Paramount executives. And I'd come to Hollywood before and Inherit the Wind, and man, I couldn't get into those studios. Only when Marlon Brando sent a car to take me through the studios, because he thought it'd be a great kick. I can't work for them, but he's going to have a big limousine pick me up from Inherit the Wind. The point is that I've been through that. This time, I sat in a room with these guys, and Frankenheimer started going about the part. And he said, "John Randolph has gone through all of the suffering because he's been blacklisted by you people." I said, "Oh, my God, there goes that part." He's going to tell them that I'm finished. They listened, they smiled. Didn't make a difference at that time. And Frankenheimer said, "I think that he would be perfect for the role." Next thing I know, I'm being screen tested. But really, I didn't know I had the job. But they were looking for somebody who was 6'1" at that time. I didn't know about Rock Hudson. All I knew is that they were looking for, and they took my picture to give to a plastic surgeon to see if he could make me into Rock Hudson. I thought I was getting on my talent, but basically I tested for a week with other people. Did not know I had the job. I just thought it was a screen test. The contract was terrible. Contract with $500 a week in Hollywood for one of the leading parts in a movie. So the boys knew that my agent had said, "John, if we get it, take it. I mean, we just got to break through." A wonderful woman named Harriet Kaplan. Anyway, the point was and at the end of the week, I then decided, screw, nobody said to me I got a job. So I said, "I'm going home. I'm not going to do any more testing." They said, "Why?" I said, "Well, nobody's approached me with a contract." No. Now I find I'm ready to go on strike, and I have never worked in this town. And the producer got after me and said, "No, you haven't got, yes, it's all set," you see. I didn't realize it was. I just didn't know how they work in Hollywood. And then when I got the job, I found the money was not worth it. I mean, I couldn't support Sarah at home, myself in a hotel room here. I had no car. I had to rent a car. I had no money. So I then threatened to go on strike. So I needed a car. They finally decided to give me more money and get my own car. I mean, that was I had them. I had fought for 15 years against blacklisting against these people. I hated them out here. They sent me a telegram before I appeared before the House Committee, my wife, the committee, saying, "If you don't cooperate with the House Committee on Un-American Activities or any committee of the United States government, you can be fined, suspended, or expelled." Threat. We told them to go to hell. I mean, that was the union leadership sending us these things. Those are the boards of our union telling an actor who had already been blacklisted that it was even worse if he didn't. He could be expelled from the union. California, they did. AFTRA and SAG, but mostly AFTRA expelled actors, and SAG did too. So I would tell you that I had no love for this town. I thought I was very understanding, but I wasn't. My wife was more, she said, I pity the people who give names. I feel sorry for them. I had it here in Hollywood. They hated anybody who gave names, and I understand that. But in New York, Sarah had a different attitude. No wasting the energy hating. There's too much energy gone. Let's fight for what we believe in, and don't give up. Stick to what you believe in. That was what made us as human beings, and that's what we did. So I stuck with it. And thank God I did, because I tell you one thing, it paid off in the respect of people for sticking up to what you believe in. I certainly didn't believe in anything that was detrimental. The whole business now, even people who think that commies or radicals or whatever it is, I'm cheerful. So I'm a cheerful radical. It's okay. It's like every organization has to have one cheerful radical, just to show that they believe in democracy. A communist, so look, he's a nice guy, and he's very cooperative, so it's all right. It's okay. Thank you, God, John, for integrating us. You see, now we can be accepted as a democracy. It is that kind of thing that you go through. Now look at me now. I come to this town. There was I now I can work, but I also know I don't like them. And they're forming an independent ticket. A whole new group of actors that I don't even know. Because to me, everybody was intimidated. Nobody wanted to stand up anymore. In Hollywood, coming here, and one of the shows that I was doing, I can't even remember which one I was called in by Jack Fields. I meet with Jimmy Whitmore. I see there are a bunch of actors who want to make a change in the union. For 38 years in Screen Actors Guild, there had been no independent ticket. Slate, elected, the fear was in. It's a wonderful thing when you're blacklisted, because anybody who stands up against you is out. Therefore, for 38 years, Ronnie Reagan and Charlton Heston and the whole bunch, they may have been nice people. I didn't know any of them. But I know that that was the atmosphere that I walked into. And when I came out to this town, when I was in seconds, there was a strike to be talked about. I went to the meeting. I just finished New York. When we had a strike talk, we all met. Every show had to show up. Every star had to show up. Attendance was taken. You had a meeting. You had to be there. And you knew how to fight. Out here, I ended up in a strike situation. My first movie. Going there, and I appear. I'm there Sunday. I see the joint is crowded, but not with stars. How can they have a strike? If the stars don't walk out, don't know what the hell's going on, there's no strike. If I were a motion picture studio, I'd say, these guys don't really mean business. And I found out that they didn't. It was settled without any trouble. I didn't know what the hell it was settled without a committee. Nothing, just settled by the leadership. So it was that kind of atmosphere that when I came back here again, when I found there was an independent ticket, they said, would you run as a representative from New York, fourth vice president? I said, I don't think you guys know about me. Barry Sullivan, a lot of people that I didn't know who were stars. I don't think you know about me. I said, I was a hostile witness against the House Committee on American Activities. I don't want you guys to be smeared with a red taint. And they said, no, nobody, they didn't blink at all. I mean, I met all these people, what's the guy who's just did that one about a white hot season, Donald Sutherland was running for office. Bert Freed, Barry Sullivan, young guys who were stars of the series. We sat around the room and talked, and I talked about myself. They talked about themselves. When I mentioned the House Committee on American Activities, I didn't see anybody wavering. This was a new breed and a new world, and the things were happening. Things were happening, and I agreed to do that. But they stood up for it, and I knew how to fight. I've been fighting for 15 years. I was valuable to them. And there were good people here. And I must say that in that time that we raised a lot of money, Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau and people that had not been doing anything, joining in and raising the money and helping give money. And I think that that was exciting to me. But that was the first time a ticket had been run opposite the so-called right wing or the conservatives in power. They didn't win, but they got 4,000 votes. They never before got them. I had to speak to these guys who expected to win. They were all winners as actors, but not against this kind of element. So when the only value I had, aside from my spirit, I had knowledge. And I remember talking to them, why are you so depressed? Before there was no votes. There was no choice. And you gave the choice and the highest vote was 4,000. That's 4,000 for Barry Sullivan that you never had before. Got to stick to it. The next year, we stuck to it. Then Dennis Weaver got elected. Then he brought the democracy into the Union. And finally, at the meeting, when we were defeated, Charlton Heston had sent letters out to people that we were the hidden, oh God, I wish I could think of that name. The behind the scenes maneuvering, running tickets. That was behind the scenes, running against a guy who was going to replace Charlton Heston. Became the, I forget his name now, became the Mexican ambassador, American ambassador to Mexico. John something or other, I'll remember. John Gavin, yeah. John Gavin. Nice guy. Really nice guy. Spoke Spanish and all the rest of it. But the point is that he was just a nice guy. We went to the meeting where we were defeated and we organized getting a hold of the microphone, and I knew they were scared stiff, and I demanded that we get the floor right after the main speech. This is the opposition ticket. I cannot tell you the fear in this town, the frightened attitude of the Union. And the guy named Chester Mignon finally arranged and said, all right, I think for the interest of peace and harmony, you'll be recognized first, John. Every microphone was covered. I mean, we had wonderful actors all ready to go. And the decision was to make it a positive experience, to get up there and say, and I know when I got the floor, I knew right away they were going to say, oh my God, he's going to yell, strike, or whatever, he's going to make a speech. And I talked about all of these people, I said, on this independent ticket, including myself, want to improve the Union. We want to make it more democratic. We offer ourselves to help in every way as a committee. Women's rights, the rights of affirmative action, of integration, the ability to make the Union available to the actors through committees, negotiating contracts with committees, just to democratize it, and we offer our services in any way. John Anderson, other people that you think are rebels, we are rebels in the sense that we would like to make it healthier, and we would like to join with the ticket that was just elected to be of help. And I tell you something, it took the steam out of the Senate. Get a standing ovation. For instead of, we condemn you, and you're right, Jane Fonda made a terrible speech that almost turned everybody off. I mean, you bunch of white chauvinists. I mean, she made the wrong statements, you know, when you try to win, but there's no discipline at that time. But those are the kind of things. She was in love with Donald Sutherland or something at that time, whatever it was, accusing them all of being male chauvinist pigs, to say, well, that's no way to win Union unity. But I would say once we began to break the barrier, once Dennis Weaver got in, Kathleen Nolan, who had been against us originally, was the first volunteer to head a women's committee, women's rights. We were on the right track of making it a better union. I loved it then. Where I hated to be, where I fled to go to New York, couldn't stand the atmosphere, when you began to see those people show up and be active who really did want to make a better union. Then many of the right-wingers who were not that right-wing, it's just they were conservative, they didn't know any better than that, coming over and joining both sides, beginning to learn from each other. When I was in negotiating and whatever the contract was, I can't even give you the exact date, I was involved with that. It was a wonderful negotiation. That was rank and file committee members working hard, got the best contract in history. Got better and better. The residual structure, all-time is work time, came out of that, calling on the rank and file, but by good leadership, opening up the committees, Women's Committee, Ethnic Minority Committee, you name it, opened up to the membership, and it turned out to be the real health. That was what I believed in. And then I became active, very active. I was elected. Big surprise. John Randolph the Red, you know? I mean, even today there's still people in the, you know, who call you all sorts of names, fighting against, I don't want to get lost in this one, but I hate apartheid. I've been involved in that movement before you even knew about it. I mean, that's how close I was to that whole thing. Today it's being brought up by some schmucky right-wing magazine. He supports Trans-Africa. He's a member of the board of directors of Actors and Artists Against Apartheid. I mean actors and athletes, against apartheid. I mean, that kind of thing. That doesn't bother me anymore. Man, the times have changed. Nobody is listening to that anymore. It's a waste of energy. So those people, we don't have to give them the right to negotiate as they want me to argue and debate on that. I don't want to do that. I've been through that road. The thing is, we now have, in the union, I became active in the conservatory committee. I advanced a lot of ideas of interviews with distinguished people. That was one thing. Other thing, making it healthy, broadening the relationship between the Screen Actors Guild and the American Film Institute, writing the contract so that it becomes realistic, so young people coming into film will work under the real conditions. I mean, I was able to be of use finally. My feelings of being involved with the ethnic minority, involved with legislation that would make this world a little better world, but trying to bring it to the Screen Actors Guild. It came out of Actors Equity, where I was very active and a member of the union. I came out here and finally ran, as I told you, and finally won. Now, I will tell you that I get probably the second or the first highest votes when I run for office. And I'm not as good now because I'm busy working. I'm so busy I can't go to all of the meetings. I used to be very good at all that. I was in the Conservatory Committee for 5 years as the chair. I loved doing it. I believed in that, helping the actor other than wages and working conditions, how to break through. So that was basically getting active and involved, and to this very day. And the final thing is running for office for the National Council, for the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists, national and local, after being made now chair of the National Council of American Soviet Friendship for the United States. Anything like that 10 years ago, no. I mean, my God, look at the association with the Reds. It had nothing to do with that. All I'm interested in is bringing us closer together with our fellow artists so we get to know them, understand them, let them understand us person to person. Nothing wrong with that. A little ahead of my time, okay? Life is going so fast that as I am talking right now, I know changes are taking place. That's exciting. That's profound. They are not empty changes. They are deep changes. And they're going to affect us, and they are affecting the world. They're affecting the third world movement. Africa, South Africa will eventually be free. But never saw it as fast, moving that fast. Impossible to believe that 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So that is a kind of excitement that makes me feel wonderful about being alive. And I am glad. I'm sorry my wife isn't here. But I figure if she's up there, if there was such a thing as heaven, then she's watching the whole thing. But I wanted to share that with her. My kids, they may agree with me or disagree. I think they all like me. My kids like me and my friends like me. But the deep, deep meaning of what's going on, I hope that they get the same feeling, that they understand that. Because this is the world that I fought for, not a perfect world, but to see the changes in growth, you see. So I'm not a politician. I don't run for office. I don't ever want to be president of the United States. I don't think I have the time and energy. I'm doing too many shows now. I'm doing a new series. I've been in a Roseanne. I've been in a new series for NBC that I hope will be successful. I'm going to do a movie. Just as this interview began, I get a call that a movie that I wanted to do during my Christmas vacation is willing to change the schedule so that I could play a part in it. That is what's exciting to me, that I'm in another stage, and I'm glad I'm in that stage, because the other side, the shitty side, I've had. I've had the unemployment. I've had the struggle. I've walked on my feet off. It's okay. I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to rejection after rejection. We get enough of that. But right now, what is exciting is to keep moving. So my motto is, don't give them a standing target, boy. John, just keep moving. Once you stop moving, they got you. This way, I can do what I want to do, believe in what I want to believe, and not stand back and say, well, I've had it. I've never had it. I will never give up the fight for what I believe in, because I'm fighting for me.